There is a quiet danger in comfort that few men ever notice until it has already taken everything from them. It does not arrive as an enemy. It arrives as relief, as ease, as something earned. And by the time it tightens its grip, the will has softened, the edge has dulled, and the man who once sought freedom finds himself unable to stand without support. This is not a new problem. It is an old one. It was understood centuries ago by Miyamoto Musashi, a warrior who lived without attachment, without luxury, and without the illusion that comfort and strength could coexist. In his final writings, he offered a warning, not loudly, not with urgency, but with the calm certainty of a man who had already seen the outcome. The man who seeks comfort cannot remain free. Chapter 1: The Subtle Trade. Daniel did not think of himself as weak. He worked hard, kept his responsibilities in order, and moved through life with quiet discipline. At least, that is what he believed. His days were structured, his routines predictable, and his environment controlled. There was always enough food, enough rest, enough distraction to smooth over any discomfort before it could deepen into something meaningful. At first, it felt like stability, like progress, like the reward for years of effort. But over time, something began to change. Not suddenly, but gradually. His mornings became slower. His decisions became softer. The sharpness he once carried, the ability to act without hesitation, began to fade. He did not notice it happening. That is how comfort works. It does not break a man. It replaces him. Musashi understood this exchange better than most. In his work, Dokodo, he wrote principles that rejected indulgence in all forms. Not because suffering was virtuous, but because dependence was dangerous. Every comfort accepted without awareness becomes a quiet chain, and chains, no matter how soft, still bind. Daniel had not chosen chains. He had simply stopped refusing them. Chapter 2: The Erosion of Edge. There is a moment in every life when resistance feels unnecessary, when discipline begins to feel excessive, when the mind whispers that ease is not weakness, but wisdom. This is the moment where most men turn away from the path without realizing it. Daniel began avoiding what once sharpened him. Difficult conversations were delayed. Physical strain was reduced. Silence was replaced with constant noise. There was always a reason, always a justification, and each one seemed small enough to ignore. But small concessions accumulate. The samurai did not train for comfort. They trained to remain steady in its absence. The code of Bushido demanded not only courage in battle, but discipline in stillness. It required a man to face discomfort willingly, to build familiarity with hardship, so that when pressure came, there would be no shock, no hesitation. Daniel had built a life where pressure was minimized, and in doing so, he had removed the very force that once kept him strong. He still believed he was in control, but control without resistance is an illusion. Chapter 3: The First Crack. It was not a dramatic failure that revealed the truth. It was something smaller. A moment that should have required decisiveness, but instead exposed hesitation. A conversation he avoided. A responsibility he delayed. A choice he could not make without doubt. For the first time, Daniel felt something unfamiliar. Not fear exactly, but instability. As if the ground beneath him was less solid than he had assumed. He realized quietly that he no longer trusted his own response. This is the cost of comfort. Not immediate weakness, but the loss of certainty. In Zen practice, there is an understanding that clarity is not found in ease, but in direct confrontation with reality. The mind becomes sharp, not by avoiding friction, but by meeting it fully. Comfort removes friction, and without friction, there is no refinement. Daniel had removed friction from his life, and in doing so, he had removed the process that once shaped him. Chapter 4. The Realization. He did not change immediately. Realization rarely leads to instant transformation. Instead, it lingers. It unsettles. It creates a quiet tension between what is and what should be. Daniel began to observe himself more closely. The small habits he had ignored became visible. The ways he avoided difficulty, the subtle reliance on convenience, the constant need for ease. None of them were extreme. That was the problem. Musashi did not warn against obvious weakness. He warned against the gradual surrender that feels reasonable at every step. In Dokodo, there is no instruction to chase suffering. There is only a refusal to depend on comfort. This distinction is critical. Strength is not built by seeking pain, but by removing the need for ease. Daniel began to understand that his life was not out of control. It was over-controlled, designed to eliminate discomfort so completely that growth had no place to exist. Chapter 5. The Return to Resistance. The change, when it began, was quiet. There was no declaration, no dramatic shift, just a decision to stop avoiding what he had been avoiding. He woke earlier, not because it was necessary, but because it was difficult. He sat in silence without reaching for distraction. He completed tasks immediately instead of negotiating with himself. Each action was small, almost insignificant on its own, but they were non-negotiable. This is where most men fail. They attempt transformation through intensity, not consistency. They seek dramatic change, but avoid sustained discipline. The samurai understood that mastery is not found in extremes, but in repetition. In the daily act of doing what must be done, regardless of preference. Daniel did not try to become stronger. He removed the habits that made him weak. Chapter 6. The Rebuilding of Self. As resistance returned, something else followed. Not immediately, but gradually. Clarity. His decisions became sharper, his actions more direct. The hesitation that once defined him began to fade. This is not motivation. It is alignment. When a man stops negotiating with discomfort, he no longer wastes energy deciding whether to act. The action becomes automatic. The mind becomes quieter. The internal conflict dissolves. Musashi lived without dependence because dependence creates hesitation, and hesitation in his world meant death. In modern life, it means something less visible but equally destructive, the slow erosion of agency. Daniel was not becoming someone new. He was returning to a state that had been buried under layers of ease. Chapter 7. The Discipline of Freedom. Freedom is often misunderstood. It is not the ability to do what one wants. It is the ability to act without being controlled by desire. Comfort, when unexamined, becomes a form of control. It dictates behavior, shapes decisions, and limits capacity. Daniel began to see this clearly. The things he once thought of as harmless preferences were, in fact, quiet dependencies. And each dependency reduced his ability to act freely. The discipline he practiced was not restrictive. It was liberating. By removing unnecessary comforts, he removed the forces that once influenced him without awareness. This is the paradox Musashi understood. The more a man requires, the less he can endure. The less he requires, the more unshakable he becomes. Chapter 8. The Unseen Strength. There is a kind of strength that is not visible. It does not announce itself. It does not seek recognition. It It exists in the absence of struggle, because the struggle has already been resolved internally. Daniel no longer felt the need to prove anything. His actions were precise, not reactive. His mind was steady, not restless. The discomfort he once avoided had become familiar, almost irrelevant. This is not numbness, it is control. In Zen, there is the idea of moving without obstruction, of acting without resistance within oneself. This state is not achieved through comfort, but through the consistent removal of internal conflict. Daniel had not eliminated difficulty from his life. He had eliminated his resistance to it. Conclusion. The warning remains the same now as it was centuries ago. The man who seeks comfort cannot remain free. Not because comfort is inherently wrong, but because it is rarely neutral. It shapes behavior quietly. It influences decisions without force. And over time, it replaces discipline with preference, strength with convenience, clarity with ease. Freedom is not lost in a single moment. It is traded slowly for relief. And the only way to reclaim it is not through intensity, but through refusal. A refusal to depend. A refusal to soften where strength is required. A refusal to negotiate what must be done. Musashi did not offer comfort, he offered truth. And for those willing to see it, the path remains unchanged.